Hello everyone, my name's Michaela, and once again, welcome to LycanhoodReads. Thank you for joining me today. Excuse any clearing of my throat or coughing. I've actually caught the COVID. I avoided it, for the past 2 years, but it finally caught up to me. I'm doing okay, but I am in quarantine right now, and I decided why not take the opportunity to get some backlog videos done and do some reviewing and some reading, of course. But yeah, so that my throat sounds a little funny or my voice sounds funny, that would definitely be the reason why. Everyone, please stay safe out there, wear your masks, and best of luck. So today I'd like to do a book review for book 2 of Sylvain Neuvel's Take Them to the Stars series. I believe it's going to be a trilogy, and book 2 is called Until the Last of Me. I was lucky enough to get an advanced reader copy of this book from the publisher via Netgalley. I was super excited. It's actually the first book I've ever received from Netgalley, and I was thrilled that it was a sequel to a book that I loved last year, and I was really looking forward to it. So the chance to read an advanced reader copy and give an honest review was something I was really excited to do. I'm sorry about the dog barking. I've apologized for her before, and I'll probably apologize for her again. I'll do my best to edit it out. So, book 2 in the Take Them to the Stars series is called Until the Last of Me. It is the follow-up to A History of What Comes Next that came out last year in 2021. So, Sylvain Neuvel is really kicking these out one after the other, which is super exciting. A History of What Comes Next was a real surprise for me last year. It was one of my favorite books I read last year. I think I gave it I don't really like star ratings, but I think I gave it like a high 4 stars, close to 5 stars, but not quite there. And I don't know why I expected anything different. Sylvain Neuvel has been such an exciting author in my life. His Themis Files trilogy really sparked my love for hard sci-fi, and it's a series that I've read several times already. I absolutely adore it. I adore his writing style. It's new, it's different, and it's always a pleasure to read. So when I got access to this early reader of Until the Last of Me, I was super excited. I wasn't really sure what to expect from the second book because the first book had been such a surprise and such a delight to read, and I wasn't sure where he was going with this story because it is such a unique story. It's not one that I've heard before. I've never seen anything like it, honestly. So this is going to be a spoiler-free review for book 2. But there will be some spoilers for book 1, A History of What Comes Next, just due to the nature of it. So if you haven't read A History of What Comes Next, please go check it out. I talk a little bit about it in my end of the year videos if you wanted to hear my thoughts on it. But the general consensus from me is that it's a great book. It's surprising. It plays with some sci-fi tropes that we've seen before, but turns them on its head. And it's just a great example of Sylvain Neuvel's really unique writing style. That is full of action and intense emotion and just really sucks you into what's happening. And it's a great example of that. So if you haven't read book 1, you're going to want to stop here because from now on I will be just diving into spoilers from book 1 as I talk a little bit about book 2 in a spoiler-free way. So while book 1 of the Take Me to the Stars trilogy was steeped in World War II, Nazi Germany, and it was very world hopping, a lot of espionage, spies, rocketeering. That book was very much so a spy centric book, which was so exciting. World War II spies. It's not something that I saw myself reading because I'm so tired of World War II stories, but it really brought a fresh take to it, and it didn't make it so much about World War II as it did just Mia and her mom and their own personal war that they were fighting. So World War II, if it's even possible, kind of took a back seat in that book, which is what I needed it to do because I don't want to hear anything more about World War II, honestly. And it almost kept me from reading A History of What Comes Next, but I'm so glad that I didn't let that happen. But it's all about the espionage in that book. It's all about the science and this really cool side of the war that is all about scientific advancement. And how, yeah, there are people doing awful things and building these weapons of mass destruction, but they're doing it looking for a different sort of goal. They're not really wanting to build weapons of mass destruction. They're just wanting to make these scientific, technological advances to go in different directions. But of course, the funding is all going towards weapons of mass destruction for the war. So, not saying that that makes it any better. It's just sort of interesting to see how these people justify what they're doing as a means to an end that doesn't really have anything to do with their political motivations. And Mia too, she totally profits off that. Her and Sarah in book one is they just profit off of all of the weapon, like space race sort of stuff from the war, because they need it to get the technological advances and to get the funding they need to take them to the stars. Book two kind of veers off from that. It picks up not long after we left off in book one, where Mia has lost Sarah. She escaped the tracker, and something new is coming, a new era for her and her daughter. Mia is on her own for the first time in her whole life. There's only her and her daughter now. There's not three. And she's still trying to follow the rules and follow the lessons that her mother tried to teach her and that she struggled to appreciate in book one. And she, so much of book one is about Mia being rebellious towards her mother and their legacy and their mission. And now she finds that it's all on her shoulders, and she's sort of put in the reverse position with her daughter, to where she has to be the one leading the charge of take them to the stars, even though she doesn't fully, it's not that she doesn't fully believe in it, but she doesn't have the answers to all those questions she had in book one, and the questions that her daughter now has, and she still doesn't have the answers, but she has to be Sarah. She has to push ahead. And that's such a terrible struggle, because she's grieving her mother, and she's also reconciling the parts of her mother that she didn't understand or didn't agree with. And it's a real, this book has a lot of grief in it, for Sarah, and then for me is also for her lost youth that she feels like has been pulled out from under her when she had her child. But beyond that, it's just a lot less sort of spy espionage stuff in the second book. It's much more so like research driven for Mia and her daughter. A lot of you get sort of like an Indiana Jones vibe from it, where they're doing a lot of research. They're like looking up ancient myths, searching for ancient tombs and artifacts, and just sort of following these breadcrumbs, because Mia isn't as involved in the rocketry program now in this second book. She's kind of been shut out of that world, especially since becoming a mother. And of course, the war is over. So while the space race is happening, there isn't a war kind of driving all that funding forward. And so the space race is struggling a little bit to get funding and to get attention. So Mia has to look for answers in other places and kind of trust that human engineering and human ingenuity is going to make advancements on its own. Because even though we've had the Kitsu, I think that's how you pronounce it, we've had them like pushing us towards the stars for all these millennia, there is something about the human spirit that sort of longs for that. And the book explores that as well, how humans are always constantly reaching towards the stars and constantly questioning what's out there beyond us. Sprinkled in between Mia's story is, of course, the story of her ancestors, just like in book one. We're seeing glimpses of the Kitsu that have come before her and what kind of contributions they made to the mission, to humankind, what kind of lives they led. And that's always interesting. We go back to some different time periods that we haven't seen before and just hear some stories that kind of sound familiar to me, at least, but they are spun on their head and given sort of a new insight in the framing of this Kitsu mission. Also, we're following one of the trackers. That was the case in book one as well, but this is a little different. We're following one of the tracker's sons, and he is starting to question his place in this mission as well, his purpose, and his role in the family of trackers. We get a lot more insight into the way that the trackers work as a unit, and just sort of the mindset that they have growing up from this new character. And we follow him throughout the book, and he's also doing a lot of the sort of Indiana Jones research stuff as he's trying, because they're taking a new approach to tracking the Kitsu, because they've totally lost track of Mia after Sarah's death. So there's a lot of research, like ancient tombs, secret tombs, world hopping. I like to say that this whole series, but especially book two, is kind of a mashup of the Americans and Indiana Jones, is sort of a love child there. And it's beautiful to see. There's still small queer elements in this book. Of course, Mia has had a female-female relationship in book one, And there's not a lot of it. That's definitely not the focus, but regardless, that's a part of Mia's identity. And I think it's something that her daughter tries to explore a little bit as well. Overall, I thought this was just a really good follow-up to book one. But it also sort of built on what was there and branched away from it, so it wasn't just more of the same. So you can see this series really gaining momentum. And Sylvain Neuvel isn't gentle with us as readers. He is going to hurt you. He's going to make you grieve. This book is about grief and about loss and just this terrible cycle of mother, daughter, grandmother, like just constantly moving forward, just like human progress and just like human ingenuity. Take them to the stars, but the Kipsu, all of the Kipsu are not going to be there to see that mission fulfilled if it ever does get fulfilled, and that is sad. And so, as attached as we might get to Sarah or Mia's daughter, we know that they might not be the ones that are going to take us to the stars. They might not be the ones to fulfill this mission. And that's always sort of looming over the readers' heads and over the Kipsu's heads, is that there can never be three for long, and they might not live to see their mission fulfilled and to see that legacy come to fruition. And that's something I love about this series, but it's also really painful because I get attached to these characters. Like, some people might read these books, and because the writing style is a tad bit distanced, they might feel like it's not character driven, but I completely disagree. I think everything about Sylvain Neuvel's writing is meant to draw you into the action and make you feel it just like in your chest, and to draw you into these characters' minds and every single thought process that they go through, every single emotional process that they go through in making these decisions and making these actions. Sometimes it comes across as like bluntly stated, or just like, man, that happened so fast, or like sometimes it doesn't linger where maybe you feel like it should, but that's part of it. It makes it feel more real because those moments go by in a flash and things happen before you even know what's going on. And that lends to the emotional weight of it because there's no time to dwell sometimes. It just happens and life is still happening and it's still moving forward. And I just love that. I think his writing does a great job of just bringing you into it and putting you in that character's headspace. And it just really knocks you off balance in the best sort of way. This book is a great example of that. Book one is a great example of that. And I'm just super excited about this series. I think it pairs really well with the Themis Files while also not being more of the same. And I love what he's doing with sci-fi. It's different than what everyone else is doing. And I don't think we're getting nearly enough attention for these books, personally. I can't wait to see what happens in book three because the ending to this one is absolutely devastating. Just a total wallop of an ending. I don't know where it's going to go from here, honestly. It totally, spoiler free, but everything at the end totally switches what we know about this world and this situation on its head. And I don't know what's coming next. So I'm super excited for book three. I really enjoyed this one, maybe more than the first one. But just the story is so interesting. I don't know. Go check it out. I highly recommend it. I can't remember the exact release date, but I'll pop it up here on the screen. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back shortly with a January wrap-up video because I wanted to talk about this one separately since Netgalley was kind enough to give me an advanced copy. Thank you so much. Have a good day.